Nikki, DZ8397, and I, TK14057, would like to welcome TK6590, better known as Steve Sansweet. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to chat with us about your 15-year career with Lucasfilm.
15 years? That's, wow. It seems like 50. No, it seems like it just went like that.
Speaking of, so in 1996, you were hired as Director of Specialty Marketing, which was later changed to Director of Content Management and also Head of Fan Relations. Especially for the fan relations position, were these newly created titles?
When I was hired in 1996, it was really to go around the country for 1 year only. One of the titles suggested at the time was Star Wars Ambassador, but the then president of Lucasfilm decided that that was a little too businessy. I have the unofficial title of Star Wars Ambassador and have had since the beginning. I sort of like that a lot better than Director of Content Management, although that took up some other parts of the job that I had. And I sort of added the fan relations part because that's what I spent a lot of time on. Mm-hmm. And that first year was going around to conventions in the US and some abroad and talking about what was coming up for 1997 and maybe beyond. So that was a very exciting year. And then after that year was over, they just forgot to fire me for 15 years. So one of those things that happens, you know, big company, you get lost. Nobody knows you're there.
As you alluded to, the new, or the title, fan liaison, or the function, I guess, allowed you to travel the world to conventions.
Well, they had asked me. It was funny when Lynn Hale, who is director of communications and now is vice president of communications, still there, called me and said, "Do you know anybody who might be interested in a 1 year only job to go out and talk to fans and we're thinking of maybe we really want our own person and not somebody who reports to Fox but reports to us, and we'll do up some video and photos and behind the scenes and show how we're changing the special editions, and we want to get people aware of them, fans aware of them and excited." It was I said, maybe something that we should talk about. I mean, she was calling because she was hoping that maybe I would be able to do that while I was a full-time bureau chief at the Wall Street Journal in Los Angeles. As it turned out, my time at the Journal was slowly coming to an end or about to change, because I had been bureau chief in Los Angeles for 9 years, which was about 3 times the amount of time that a bureau chief usually was in one location. Mm-hmm. And so they offered a job back in New York as an editor, to start a Southern California edition of the Journal, or to become a super reporter. And I wasn't particularly interested in any of that, so I decided to go talk to Lucasfilm, because that was a place I always fantasized of being, and to be behind the scenes. And I already knew some of the people there because I was reading some books for Lucas. We had a chat and I said, yes, I'd be interested. And they said, well, we're thinking of if you could do as many as 8 to 9 conventions during the year. And I ended up doing about 40. And I met so many wonderful people, and that was the start of what has become life devoted to Star Wars fandom.
The meeting of the fans, you know, that's something that you haven't experienced before, you know, as Wall Street's LA, you know, bureau chief. What was the first ever convention like? Do you remember where that was? And how did the fans react to you, I guess, or to the Star Wars news of these special editions coming up?
Yeah, the very first convention was something that I had really little experience on, and I went with Howard Rothman, who was the head of licensing at Lucasfilm, and the guy who really knew Star Wars better than just about anybody at the company except for George. Howard gave the first presentation. It was at the University of Texas, and I went there, sat in the auditorium with Howard. We had gone over this before, but I was taking notes busily as a reporter. I was on the next day. We did a 2 days of presentations. And so that was the basis of my presentation, what Howard had just sort of given extemporaneously, because he knew it so well and knew what was in all the clips and things of that nature. Harry Knowles, who founded Ain't It Cool News, which is still around, but I mean, it was when he launched it and shortly thereafter became the biggest phenomenon on the internet as far as um, fans and movies. And Harry is an incredible guy himself, but he says in a book that he wrote about Ain't Cool News that he was so excited by the presentation that I gave and the clips that I showed that he went home and immediately wrote something up and posted it online. And that was sort of the inspiration for Ain't It Cool News. I was always excited after I read that it had that kind of effect on one person. And the reception that I got all over the US and then in as I started doing some international conventions was always great. And it was always wonderful to meet Star Wars fans. And this was something that I really followed in the footsteps of a lot of people from early in the day, going back 5 years after Lucasfilm was founded in 1971. It exists to this very day. And one of the reasons that Lucasfilm has so many fans out there, like the 501st and the Rebel Legion and the Mandalorian Mercs and clubs and hundreds, if not thousands, of websites and podcasts and blogs and Facebook groups. It's just amazing. But it just shows what service to fandom can do for you and how it pays off and how long lasting it is.
So around the same time when he became Wall Street's LA bureau chief, there was a 10-year convention, what fans call lovingly Celebration Zero, that was actually titled, had a much longer title. Did you attend this event?
I did. It was in 1987. It's the 10th anniversary convention put on by Starlog magazine, and it had George Lucas as a guest. We finally got George back at a Celebration convention many years later. It was the first time that he met Gene Roddenberry, and I was there for 2 of the 3 days of the convention. The day that I missed was the day that George spoke, because I had to fly back for my grandnephew's wedding.
So while we're on the topic of conventions, I was curious if you had any insight into how Star Wars Celebration came to be.
Oh yeah, I was there. It really was 2 different parties coming up with the idea around the same time. And my boss, Jim Ward, who was the head of marketing, said, we really need to do something to approach and get the fans excited about episode 1. Not that they weren't excited already and were even more excited after the trailer came out in November of 1998. But we started talking about things like, he said, how about we have some sort of a fan convention, a fan fest, and we have it in 5 different cities on the same weekend. And I said, let me give Dan Madsen, who is head of the fan club and the Insider magazine, a call. And as it turned out, Dan and his people have been talking about the same thing, some sort of an event to get people excited about the episode 1. And so after much talk and a list of about 100 names, including Fan Fest and Star Wars Jubilation and Star Galacticon and Star Wars Celebration, and that became the name. And then Dan wanted it someplace close by. The convention center was already booked, and so we went to the Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum, which was on an abandoned Army base or Air Force base. The idea was to try to use some of the buildings there, but none of them were really usable. And so we got tents and we got the 50-year rains that were totally unexpected. So it became more of a mud stuck, and that's the way Star Wars fans remember it. the leaky tents and the water in the dealer's tent and on the ground, and yet it was amazing and people loved it, and it was the camaraderie and the fun and the excitement of being together with fellow fans. And I think that is the hallmark not only of our Star Wars celebrations, people coming together and seeing people that they only get to see at Celebration once every couple of years, but that's the hallmark of Star Wars fandom as a whole. It's that coming together of fandom that makes Star Wars so great. And I think, again, that's something that was in Lucasfilm's bones from the beginning. It really all goes back to 1976 and a guy named Charles Lippincott, who many of our listeners have heard of. And Charlie was vice president of marketing and merchandising and advertising and publicity. And his business card had 3 lines on it because he was doing so much. And Charlie was very much attuned to the comic book world and the convention world. And Charlie brought Star Wars on the road. He said, we've got to get the fans out there interested in it, because I don't trust the movie studio to do a good enough job to really go out there and market this as a really special kind of movie. Charlie went to about 4 fan conventions in the summer of 1976. And the 2 major ones were San Diego Comic-Con, which had only started up in 1970. A couple of months later, Worldcon, which was in Kansas City that year, and actually brought props and costumes from the movie and had some film footage to show. That's why people were in line for Star Wars when it first opened on May 25th, 1977, and lines were around the block, and that attracted the media, and that's how Star Wars, the hype was really real. It wasn't artificial hype. It was really excitement over this new movie and this new kind of movie.
Grassroots viral. That's the original.
It really is. There had been fan clubs in the past in the 30s when Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon were on the radio and did radio serials, and you could send away for your decoder rings and your special Superman rings and things of that nature. And when Bantha Track started as the quarterly newsletter for Star Wars, the first year it was licensed out, and then it was brought in-house and ran until 1987. It was pretty amazing, and it was not just Star Wars, but the other movies that Lucasfilm was doing at the time too. They had a whole team internally at Lucasfilm, and many of the things that they started back then have continued to this day at Lucasfilm. And that's, if they get a question from a fan, they reply, whether it's written, whether it's an email. They answer questions. They're very attentive to the feedback that they get from fans, and that's sort of led to certain directions that things are done in. It's a pretty amazing legacy. Another part of that legacy is, again, early in the days of the internet, when fans started doing their own fan films. And we'll see if we can get George to buy into this. And so the Star Wars Fan Film Awards were started in 2002. We had trophies. George agreed to give on the video the top award, the George Lucas Selects Award. And it was a very exciting time to be in charge of fan relations at Lucasfilm during the prequels.
Let's jump forward to January 1st, 2007. Arguably probably the most amazing fanboy and fangirl moment of those Legion members who were chosen to parade in the Rose Parade in Pasadena. How did that all come about?
That was George's idea, actually. Jim Ward had become head of LucasArts at that time, and my boss at that point was Tom Warner. And Tom went for a meeting with George early in 2006 and came back and came into my office, closed the door and said, we're going to have a meeting on this later, but would you believe that George wants to do the Rose Parade to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Star Wars? And I said, fans have been asking for this for years. We've had the 501st folks say, could they march in the Rose Parade? I've always had to say, no, you have to spend money. It costs. We can't do that. It has to be official. And he said, and George wants them not only from as many states in the U.S. as they exist in, but also from countries around the world. And so that's when we put together a team. My job was to select the stormtroopers who would be marching, and other people were in charge of the floats. First, didn't want to do floats, and then the Rose Parade people, who were very excited to have us, said, well, we have to have floats. And so then George got very excited and said, okay, we'll do floats, and we can have X-Wings and TIE fighters come down Colorado Boulevard. And they said, actually, we can't have anything that looks warlike. And we couldn't have the stormtroopers with their guns either. But otherwise, it was a year of work. It sent the 501st into its giant orbit. Having all those folks come together and meet people, and Albin Johnson, the founder of the 501st, was there, having people have that sense of worldwide fandom and coming together. And this was something direct from the maker. It was his idea. And then we surprised people at a banquet that we had a couple of nights before the march.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce George Lucas.
Thanks for volunteering for this special mission. This is a first campaign in our effort to rule the universe.
In the 2 years after that, the 501st just really added a tremendous number of men and women from around the world who were interested in joining, and helped build the 501st into the organization that it is today.
Yeah, I know those the men and women that were selected to participate, they still talk about that to this day as their, most treasured experience.
It wasn't easy picking people from discs and video. And I always tell the story about how we got one and I thought I was watching it in slow motion. And it was just how these folks from a certain country that I won't name weren't used to marching, didn't have a standing army. It looked like a funeral procession, but we wanted them anyway. Okay, we can only get more people from other countries. So it was a real challenge. Used everybody. So it was great fun. And it was wonderful to work with fans of every stripe. We worked with some of the Rebel Legion members at that time too, and some of the face characters that we got.
It's no secret that you've been collecting memorabilia for, since the beginning.
Secret.
So after your career at Lucasfilm, you put your main focus on the collecting side and opened Rancho Obi-Wan, a nonprofit museum that contains the world's largest Star Wars memorabilia collection. I know that a lot of work went into all that happening, and involved many dedicated people. But in my opinion, there was a seamless transition from your career as fan relations head to now being chairman and president of your museum. You still cater to the fans. You still interact with the fans when they tour. You go to conventions still, and those who can come to your museum, your setups at celebrations are always a big crowd drawer. So is that something that you imagined doing when you opened the museum, that you would have the same sort of feedback or fan interaction?
The whole purpose of Rancho Obi-Wan is to share the collection with fans all over the world. You can have a collection, and if you have it in boxes or you have it locked up and nobody can see it, what good is it? I mean, you walk through it, but the whole idea is that you can share it. They say almost invariably at the end of the tour, I had no idea. This was great. I had so much fun, because it's all about the stories. We have wonderful docents who tell a lot of the stories and the anecdotes, and it's that sharing and that ability to. It's not just a bunch of stuff. It's stuff from our childhoods. It's stuff that the kids today are excited about. So we go from the original Star Wars, or even like the year before the original Star Wars, to The Mandalorian.
You have a lot of fan-made art in your museum too, and um, and I like your mission to accomplish, like you set out to accomplish, to inspire people to be creative.
That's a wonderful point, because I find that Star Wars fans, more than any other fans of any other of the genre series, movies, books, etc., like to play in the sandbox that George Lucas created. They become creative based on this amazing creativity that Star Wars is and has inspired. And so we've got people who have become artists because of Star Wars, and writers, directors, gotten into the movie business, gotten into the visual effects business. But we really love the fan art, and I've made a deep commitment in the collection. I mean, you know, if you have enough money, and I don't, I am not independently wealthy. But if you have enough money, you can buy a lot of stuff. But what really excites me is the fan-made items, the fan art, the beautiful fan art. And I've made friends with so many of the artists over the years, and have had the ability to get them involved in Lucasfilm projects, which has been very exciting for me. The fan-made action figures, the fun things, the skeletons of Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen, Ewoking Dead, just this wild sort of political commentary using Star Wars parody figures, beautiful pieces like from my friend Marcos and Marco in Peru, that are Peruvian art done but in the Star Wars style. So there's just all kinds of things worldwide. You get the Russian Matryoshka dolls, things that just appeal to people in different cultures, and you see Star Wars filtered through different eyes and different cultural nationalities and things of that nature.
You were going to mention to us how you sort of pivoted during the pandemic for Rancho Obi-Wan.
When we realized that the pandemic was going to last for quite a while, we have done lots of videos over the years. So the virtual museum is very active these days. And this is our 10th anniversary of Rancho Obi-Wan. We opened in the fall of 2011. We have lowered the price and taken off all the levels. And so it's $10 a month to join the virtual museum, as opposed to the 5 different levels, which was a little confusing, and the higher prices. So we hope to attract more people to the virtual museum, and we have all kinds of things about some of the rooms, like some of my stories about my career, parts of the museum that you don't see on the live tours, which usually last about 2 to 3 hours, and are done mostly by our docents these days. They're looking better these days, and we hope to open sometime late summer, early fall, when more people are vaccinated, and get back to what we love to do, which is interact in person with fans from all over the world.
Sounds great. We would love to come visit again. And for those who cannot come visit, like as I mentioned before, you have those beautiful displays at the celebration. So is that still in the works for next year, Anaheim?
Well, when they decided to cancel Celebration for 2 years, they said, we certainly hope to see you when we come back in 2022. So they're just starting their planning for that, although it's going to be earlier than we had thought. We are certainly hoping to be invited back, and very much look forward to getting back on the convention circuit and seeing our friends, and having another great Rancho Obi-Wan exhibit. In the meantime, people can become a member of Rancho Obi-Wan by going to ranchoobiwan.org, signing up for the membership. You get your kit and your patch. And we have a way now of, if you've missed previous years, of signing up for a bundle for all of the years that you missed, and you'll get all the swag, all the patches, all the pins and everything else. And you can become a lifetime member that way, the first 10 years, and join the virtual museum and see new video and photos practically every week posted.
Well, Steve, thank you again for making time to talk to us, and for sharing those unique memories. Some of the stories, I've never heard. I'm sure other people haven't. So thank you again.
There are many more stories where that came from. So I'll be here and hope to see you all in the not too distant future.